You bet it does. Can I ask you about something that you said a few minutes ago, talking about back when you were at the academy, talking about carrying people on your back in the pool, pushing them up over the walls in the obstacle course, and then none of them would come forward and support you. And you said something that really struck me. You said they're so fearful. They were so fearful. Tell us about that dynamic. What were they fearful of and why?
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to you and the ranking member for holding this hearing today. Thank you for each of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your service to our country, first of all. And thank you for serving your country today by being here today to shine light and expose what has happened. And I just want to say, I can't believe we are sitting here today. I can't, first of all, words fail me in saying what has happened to each of you and offering condolences. That doesn't begin to cut it. But I also just cannot believe that the extent of the cover-up for years and years and years and years. And I also can't believe, Mr. Chairman, that the Coast Guard has had this report since 31 January 2020, and they sit on it for 3+ years and deliberately conceal it from us. I mean, deliberately conceal it. Ms. Morrow, I wanted to ask you about something you said in your written testimony. I cannot imagine what this was like for you. You said you found out from CNN that your case was included in Operation Fouled Anchor. I just want to read what you said here. Not from an Academy representative, not from CGIS, not from Congress. The news was broken to me by the press over the phone while I was wiping my child's runny nose. Tell us what it is like to frankly be betrayed in that way, such that you've got a member of the press, which thank goodness they got it. Thank goodness whomever it was, the whistleblower, whomever leaked it to them. Because otherwise we probably still wouldn't know about it. But just tell us what that was like, to get a call and to say, hey, by the way, there's this report that you've never heard of and your case is in it, and do you have a comment?
Yes, I have several. I would like to start by saying that I wish I could put that whistleblower on my Christmas card list for the rest of my life. Because without that whistleblower, something that I had thought that I had put to bed decades ago was just resurrected. I have been minding my own business the last several decades. I left the academy, haven't had careers like the other ladies up here. I am living a blissfully average life with my husband and my children in Tennessee. And in a mom bun, in like dirty leggings, my very good friend sent me a link in my text messages saying, look at the CNN article. Weren't you at the academy during this time period? And again, my heart hit my feet, and I read the report, and I immediately contacted the CNN reporter. She immediately contacted me back and said, I've been looking for you. Your name is in this report. I've been looking for you. And it was clear to me that even though I had been in therapy all those years, that I had not healed. And like I mentioned in my testimony, I was wiping my son's runny nose with my phone up to my ear like this, listening to her tell me this. And I still don't have words. I've been suffering since June, since I heard. Went back into therapy and finally found a great counselor who diagnosed me with complex PTSD. And that was very freeing. So this has, in many ways, been a blessing for me because I finally have a diagnosis for the things that I thought were just personality quirks these last 20 years was actually, in fact, PTSD. I don't know if that answers your question fully. I'm happy to expound.
No, you bet it does. Can I ask you about something that you said a few minutes ago, talking about back when you were at the academy, talking about carrying people on your back in the pool, pushing them up over the walls in the obstacle course, and then none of them would come forward and support you. And you said something that really struck me. You said they're so fearful. They were so fearful. Tell us about that dynamic. What were they fearful of and why?
Frankly, they were fearful of the stripes on leaders' shoulders. The bigger the stripes, the bigger the threat. We all know this.
So what would, walk us through that? I mean, just help us. What was the threat? If they supported you and they said, yes, she's telling the truth, what would happen?
You would be, blacklisted in a way. I don't know how else to better explain that. Every person that has gone into a service academy knows how difficult it is and how driven and how hardworking you have to be to get there. I mean, it's not like the normal, acceptance routine that most kids have to go through to get into colleges. They are very, very special people. They're talented, they're hardworking, and they're smart. And to get there, you had to work your tail off. And to stay there, you have to work equally as hard. And it was a lot to lose. To be kicked out, thrown on the streets without any, VA help, for depression or suicidal thoughts, it's crushing. I mean, I had to start over from square one. Like I said in my written testimony, I had several NCAA Division I rowing scholarships. I chose to go to the Coast Guard Academy to serve my country. I even turned down the Naval Academy to go there too. And then after one semester, I'm out on the streets, so to speak. It was a lot to lose.
Oh my God, yes it is. And help me understand, help us understand the culture. So leadership they don't want to hear it, right? There's retaliation, there are repercussions. If somebody supports you, they're going to get blacklisted because the leadership doesn't want to deal with the problem, or they don't want to help explain that piece of it to us. Why not just say, why wasn't leadership in your case saying, this is unbelievable, this is terrible, it's probably a crime. For many of you, it is a crime, which you described. Sexual assault's a crime, rape's a crime. So it's not just bad behavior, it's criminal behavior. Help us understand the culture that says, oh, we're just going to, see no evil, hear no evil, look the other way, we don't want to deal with it, such that if you press the issue and you say, no, actually, I was assaulted, actually, I was raped, they say, we've got to silence you. I mean, we've got to shut this down. We can't deal with this. Why is that? I mean, help us get into the mindset, to the best you can, their mindset.
Keep in mind, I was only there for one semester, so my experience is going to be a little bit more limited than the other ladies up here. But like others have touched on, there's this fear of retaliation, and then, the academy itself is an incredibly, especially your freshman year, is an incredibly strong pressure cooker type environment. When I was there, you were not allowed to have cell phones. You were not allowed to have iPods when they were back a thing. There's no music, there's no connection to the outside world, and you have to eat on squares. I don't know if you guys know what that is. You're turning, you're braced up. You have to have your eyes in the boat. There's no relief from this pressure, and I forget exactly where I was going with that. Excuse me, but so this pressure cooker type environment just creates this difficulty in trying to, you're just taking care of yourself. You're in like survival mode, so to speak. And so it's hard to see someone suffer and then to speak out about it, because it also might spotlight you as well. And so if you are guilty of consuming alcohol underage, or guilty of doing something that would merit a demerit, you just keep your mouth shut. I can't handle demerits on my record. I have bad grades, or I just don't want to spotlight myself. So I think that's in a roundabout way, and I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I don't want to monopolize the time, Mr. Chairman. I'd be interested actually in the response to that question from everybody. Is it okay, Mr.? Yeah, please, go ahead, Lieutenant McCaffrey.
Yeah, Senator Hawley, I will try to make this as macro level as possible, given my 12 years of experience at literally every single level within the organization, from my 4th class year as a cadet to the front office of Commandant Advisory Group. I served on the front office staff on the Commandant's Advisory Group for Admiral Zumkunft from 2016 until I ultimately was medically retired in 2019 for sustained PTSD. And what I observed directly in headquarters at that office, where I am surrounded by the cream of the crop of leaders, senior leaders, is that they implement safeguards within each other, for each other. And I call these people the gatekeepers. Time and time again, I would go to these gatekeepers, my immediate boss, who was an 05, a commander, and an 06, a captain. I would come to them with legitimate problems backed by reams and reams of data. Example, 2016, we had a retention problem then, and it's only gotten worse. I tried to bring this to the awareness of Admiral Zumkunft and was told outright not to do it. Those gatekeepers prohibited access to him so they did not have to give him bad news. And the reason they did this is because they were up for promotion. I hate to say it, I honestly hate to be the one to call this out, but this is the reality. This is it. This is the reason. They just want to promote. They want to make the next rank. They want to become a captain. The captains want to become an admiral, and they want to join that so-called esteemed and privileged club. That is exactly what it is, and they don't care about the carnage left in their wake. They do not care about their loyalty to the oath. They don't care. They just want to make the next rank, and I have seen it in the fleet, at the academy, at the senior-most levels. And I have seen it time and time and time and again. And while I really do applaud my colleagues' optimism and that it's better, I have seen the reality, and I have not been out that long. I retired in 2019 at the pinnacle of my career, having saved, with my teams, nearly 17,000 people. And yet this organization, these senior leaders who are still here, refuse to do something they could easily do tonight. Should Admiral Fagan be genuine in her ability and her action to do something, she could recall every single one of those senior leaders tonight. She could charge them under her authority given to her via the UCMJ, and she could hold them accountable. But the unspoken and the unwritten rule that I have learned from my own experiences, and again, I need to caveat this, that not everyone in the Flag Corps, not all captains are bad. Many are good. But the ones in power, the ones who make the decisions, the one who overrule convictions, criminal convictions, are the ones who often stay the longest and rise the ranks to the highest point. And then when you add in the complexity of a gatekeeper, an 06, a 1-star, or a commander, they are just simply not getting the information that they need. And that's just that is the reality of the situation. It comes down to individual ego and ambition and their need and desire to promote for power.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. I think we have time for some additional questions. I'm going to ask some and then yield to my colleagues if they have any. Let me just begin by asking you, Lieutenant McCaffrey, about a specific instance that I think proves your point. There have been public reports that the Coast Guard leadership declined to court-martial former Coast Guard Academy professor, Captain Glenn Solmacy, after he was found to have had inappropriate communications with a student, even though investigators recommended charges for conduct unbecoming an officer and willful dereliction of duty. I think you experienced harassment from Captain Solmacy. Let me ask you about that experience. What does the decision not to prosecute tell you about this culture of cover-up?
I think that what has happened with Glenn Solmacy, and forgive me, I no longer address him as captain because frankly, I don't think he deserves the level of respect according to that position. So I just call him Glenn Solmacy. But I think that is the perfect example. It is the most visible example. It is certainly one of the most well-documented examples. Here you have a situation where a captain, a United States Coast Guard active duty captain, who was the dean of the humanities department, over years, not only reached out to cadets inappropriately, touched them inappropriately, and God forbid, to my knowledge, and I cannot confirm or deny this because I was just through the rumors, had sexual intercourse with these cadets as well, continued to do it with impunity for years. And when I first started having interactions with Glenn Solmacy, I reported it. I reported it to a mid-level officer at the academy. And the impression I received from that conversation was the reality is, reporting aside, he is untouchable. He is protected at very high levels, and we know this is happening. We are aware of it. They are aware of it, and nothing will be done. So when I learned that he had, and this is the only reason why I'm here today, like my colleague, I was finally at a place physically, emotionally, mentally to put all of this behind. It took me almost 4 years after my suicide attempt to regain any semblance of composure and rationality and reality. The impacts were devastating. I cannot understate that it is devastating. And the only reason why I am here today is because a classmate sent me a news article that Glenn Solmacy was opening a women's college. So a known sexual predator within our organization, documented, verified, substantiated, was not only allowed to retire with honors and a government pension, they then wrote him a letter of recommendation endorsing his integrity and his character, and they continued to protect him. And the sad reality is, I have received communications from civilians who have been impacted by his conduct. So we knowingly let a sexual predator into the world to become in another position of power at not just one, but 2 colleges where multiple women have been impacted. And if this is not a textbook case of exactly what I'm mentioning, I honestly do not know what is. And to my knowledge, as of today, they have still done nothing. They could bring him back, and even if they couldn't substantiate charges under rape or sexual assault or retaliation or bullying or the numerous articles outlined in the UCMJ, they could easily charge him with conduct unbecoming of. They could easily charge him with dereliction of duty. They choose not to. And that is the problem, right there, in its essence, at its core.
Ms. Marrow, you know, I was struck by your telling us that the Coast Guard wouldn't give you your own records. And then by your question, what are they hiding? I think that's the question that lingers here and will linger after this testimony and will be the challenge for this committee. And will be a focus for this committee in demanding the emails that go to the reasons, for example, as Senator Hawley said, that 3.5 years, the fouled anchor report was withheld. It was the result of an investigation that started in 2014. It took 6 years to complete, even though it was covering only a limited time period and a limited number of cases. And then from January of 2020 to June of 2023, nothing, until CNN disclosed it. If CNN hadn't disclosed it, we might still not know about it. So maybe talk a little bit about what you think this concealment of your records and other facts that are important for us to know means to us.
Thank you for that question. I appreciate the chance to answer that. The fouled anchor report came out. I found out about it, and I immediately filed for, I filed a FOIA request for that report. It was denied. Like I mentioned at that point, I reached out directly to the Coast Guard Academy, just trying to do my best to gather as much about my file as possible. I got some of it. It was clear that there was a lot missing because the very, very last piece of paper that was in that 132-page file, by the way, and I was only there for a semester, was this email. It was from the then civilian professor that I confided in, to my company commander, called me unstable in this email to my company commander. And then at the very end, he has a very small aside at the bottom saying, "Fourth class stopper mentioned something about sexual harassment and assault in the barracks. I trust that you're looking into this." And at the bottom, there's a handwritten note from my company commander, looks like to then Assistant Commandant of Cadets, Commander Pulver, saying this turned out not to be about sexual harassment, but a dispute with her first-class division lead who wouldn't let her boyfriend study with her during study hour. My company commander who wrote that note never talked to me about this. He never got that information from me, and this was the last thing that was in my file. And I noticed that the rest of the investigation that supposedly happened was not in there. So I went back to the person, Amanda Thiessen, at the academy, asking her where the remainder was. And then all of a sudden, I find myself talking to the current commandant, assistant commandant of cadets, Commander Cassavant, who told me to submit a FOIA for my own personal records. And I share your frustration with the FOIA process, Senator Johnson, because if I FOIA'd it, they would have reserved the right to redact anything and everything. But even that aside, I shouldn't have to FOIA for my own documents. They're mine, they belong to me. And further to expound on that, I was working with a staff member on the Commerce Committee after the hearing that they held in July with Admiral Fagan, and she had her boots on the ground in August, I believe, at the Academy to investigate what came up. And the Academy released part of that investigation to her without my express permission. So the Academy will release documentation to Congress without my permission or an individual's permission, but they won't release it to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one more question, because I know we're going to hear from people, oh, you know, this is really regrettable. It's too bad that members of the Coast Guard had to go through this horrific experience, but and frankly, we get this comment a lot. Don't you have better things to do? Don't you have more important things? This is about our national security. The Coast Guard is a military service. They not only rescue people who are desperate at sea, they interdict illegal drugs. You provide essential national security services. The Coast Guard is a really important military security institution. And let me just ask Colonel Fenner, as an Air Force veteran, not a member of the Coast Guard, but as a historian and scholar, would you agree that this issue is a national security and national defense issue?
Absolutely, sir, and thank you for the question. As a historian, it is shocking, but it is not new. It's shocking that it has continued for so long. But to speak to national security, again, I have the DoD background, as Secretary Austin has emphasized over his short tenure. The people are the thing. The people drive the ships. The people rescue the other people. The people fire the weapons. So if you don't take care of your people and their families, Then you have this recruiting problem, this retention problem, this readiness problem, all of the associated problems of mental health and depression. And then do you have an effective, ready force to put in the field under stress and under fire? No, we do not. So taking care of these people, all the people, the young men who've had these experiences that aren't sitting here, the families who have dealt with the aftermath of their loved ones being assaulted and ostracized in this way, all of us are affected. And it is from time immemorial, Senator Johnson, that one can ask themselves, where are these people with daughters and wives and sisters and sons in some cases who are not outraged, who are not taking proactive actions? That is, to me, as shocking as it is to you, sir, that everybody knows somebody, and yet nobody knows anybody. On the plus side, a historical story. In the 1940s, women were part of preparedness movements, and they made up their own uniforms so they could be militaristic, and they were going to do home front things. And all of the generals on the Joint Staff did not want women in the services to actually serve, in Barr's case exactly, in the reserves. And then the daughters started talking to their fathers. And all of a sudden, a whole bunch of generals were converted to agreeing to put women in the military. How do we affect the fathers and the brothers and the spouses? In my case of sexual harassment, as a faculty member, it was my male colleagues who helped report and supported me. When the men get as interested in this problem on a larger scale as the women are, we might see change in a positive direction. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.